You're listening to episode 105 of Literacy in Color. Transitioning from classroom teacher to literacy coach is really exciting, but it also can be overwhelming. How do you build trust, support veteran teachers, know when to offer advice, and when to simply listen? Today's episode is part coaching conversation. So as a literacy coach, Leah Ruesink shares about her transition to coach and what coaching really looks like behind the scenes. Leah shares some lessons that she's learned along the way, including how to build meaningful relationships, navigate imposter syndrome, and support teachers through instructional change. Then the conversation shifts into one of Leah's greatest passions, writing instruction. And if you've ever felt less confident teaching writing than reading, you're certainly not alone. So Leah will introduce you to self-regulated strategy development, also known as SRSD, which is an evidence-based writing framework that explicitly teaches students how to plan, organize, and write, all while regulating themselves throughout the writing process. So while this episode speaks directly to a literacy coach's heart, classroom teachers, you'll definitely walk away with some really practical ideas and valuable insights for explicitly teaching writing in your classrooms. Welcome to the Literacy in Color podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Sullivan, a science of reading advocate with over a decade of experience as a reading interventionist and literacy coach. I'm passionate about making evidence-based instruction both effective and engaging. If you're interested in captivating our learners on reading fluently and understanding language, or as I like to call it, keeping it colorful, then you've found the right place. Each week, we'll explore intriguing lit bits and practical strategies around the science of reading and structured literacy to help you be colorful and teach colorfully. Are you ready to bring literacy to life? Let's color outside the lines and make an impact together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Literacy in Color. I'm so excited to be joined by a good Instagram friend, Leah Ruesink, the early literacy coach. And today we're going to have part coaching conversation and part writing instruction conversation. So it's going to be a good one. So buckle up and welcome to the show, Leah. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. This is one of my favorite podcasts, so I'm so excited and honored to be on your podcast today.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I always love your recaps because I'm like, oh, what's Leah listening to this week? Likely, I have it on my playlist as well.
I love podcasts. It's a great way to learn.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey into becoming a literacy coach. And I know that wasn't something that you set out to be earlier on in your career. So maybe you can just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey into becoming a coach.
Sure. So my name is Leah, everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. I began my journey in education as a classroom teacher. So I started out teaching preschool, teaching young fives, teaching kindergarten. So those earlier grades are really my jam. I love early literacy. But initially, I left my undergrad program really feeling like there had to be more when it came to teaching reading and writing. I felt like I didn't have everything I needed. And so I decided to go back to grad school about 5 years into my teaching career and went into a literacy studies program. And near the end of that program, I saw a job posting for an early literacy coach and decided, oh, I'm going to apply for this. This is exciting. So I went through the interview process, made it through round one, and then they asked me to do a second interview. And in this second interview, I had to observe a small group lesson and give feedback to a teacher. And they also asked me to analyze a set of data. And I just had a lot of imposter syndrome in that moment. Like, why am I cut out to do this? Do I have the experience? I've been a classroom teacher. This teacher is more experienced. So a lot of those feelings that I'm sure are relatable for a lot of other new coaches. Luckily, I had a friend who convinced me to take the interview. She believed in me before I believed in myself and convinced me to take it. So that's where I am today. I became a coach. I've been doing that for the last 5 years, coaching preschool through about fourth grade teachers.
I love that story. And the imposter syndrome is so real because I became a coach I don't remember how old I was exactly, but in my late 20s, like fairly earlier on in my career. But it's like supervisors saw the good in me. And it's not always this veteran teacher that becomes the coach. Sometimes it's just this go getter who is a people person or apt to learn and like in it. So I resonate with that as well.
Yeah.
And then what surprised you most when you first became a literacy coach?
So looking back, I think I assumed coaching was about expertise when I first became a coach and having all the answers. So I was really focused on creating something concrete for teachers. So I would create resources, I would create templates, and I thought that was the way I was going to earn my value in the school. But I remember walking into schools thinking if a teacher asked me a question and I didn't know the answer, they were going to realize I wasn't supposed to be there. So again, that imposter syndrome in the first few months of my role. And I like to tell this story. This was, I think, like the second or third week in my role that I met with two different teachers. The first one was a brand new novice teacher. She was straight out of college. And she wanted to meet to talk about resources. She wanted advice. I remember she would like lean in when I spoke, and she was just so excited to soak it all in. And I left that meeting feeling like, I've got this coaching thing down. I've got it. And then later in the week, I met with a more experienced teacher who pulled out this set of data she had already analyzed. She was so excited to have this deeper conversation with me. But I realized quickly I didn't have the skills to guide that conversation. And it was going to look really different to support new teachers and more experienced teachers. So that was kind of where I learned expertise wasn't going to get me super far. That's a part of the role, but we also need to learn how to navigate coaching conversations. There's so many other nuanced parts of coaching.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And I remember reading books earlier on about the art of having these coaching conversations. And there were even perspectives like I took on for myself that I was like a problem solver. And if someone came to me, I like wanted to solve their problem and like give them the answer. But then a good coach guides, a good coach doesn't always just tell you, it's like guiding you to come to that realization with different information there too. So it
Yeah,
really is an art.
it is. And I think coaching conversations are so different than just a casual conversation, which I didn't know right off the bat. So they're really intentional. You're listening and you're deciding when to ask another question, when to offer a resource, when just to sit in silence and pause and let the teacher talk. So that's something, it's a skill. It's something I had to learn over time.
Definitely. And then when it comes to skills,
Mhm.
in that new role, what kinds of things did you think were most beneficial from your experience as a classroom teacher becoming a coach? And what kind of skills did you really feel like you had to learn? And I know conversations were definitely one of them.
For sure. Well, I could relate to teachers because I had just been one. So I think just having that empathy for the teacher experience and knowing everything that teachers have on their plate. I also, as a classroom teacher, I was used to collaborative planning and lesson planning. And so I kind of came in feeling really good about that. Like I could join grade level teams and kind of help them through the planning process and be a part of the team. But that's pretty much where my expertise stopped. And I felt like I had to learn most everything else. I quickly learned teaching kids and coaching adults were two very, very different things. A big one is adult learning principles. I had to learn, how do adults learn? How do I support this learning? And I think I learned most of this from my mentor coach. Her name is Melissa. She's amazing. And I remember sitting in on coaching conversations with her. She would be having a conversation with a grade level team. And I was just fascinated. She had this way of connecting to people, and she'd confidently share ideas, but she didn't come off as a know it all. And I just remember thinking, how does she do that? It just seemed to come so easily to her. But I realized it's a skill that she's built over time. She's been in this for a while, and it's something I just needed some practice with. So for any new coach listening, you do kind of acquire the skill over time, but it's not something you're going to have right off the bat.
Yeah. And I love how you shared even that her personality was like skilled, yet didn't come off as a know it all. And I feel like that is this ideal kind of like essence that you want in a coach
Mhm.
because it can be so hard. You can have this expert, and that can be intimidating to a lot of teachers. Like, oh gosh, like the last thing that I need is another expert watching me teach and telling me the things that I'm doing wrong or the things that I need to fix. But a coach is so different from an administrator, and it really has like a different aura to the whole role, too.
Yeah, and it's hard to strike that balance sometimes. You have to be a little bit of an expert and share ideas once in a while, but you want to really come alongside teachers and you want them to feel like you're their partner.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to kind of navigate that when you're brand new to the role.
Definitely. And then when it comes to teachers' perspectives of a coach, sometimes they're unsure what a literacy coach even is supposed to do. Is this just someone who's supposed to give me advice about curriculum or instruction? So, what does coaching actually look like from the day to day?
Yeah, well, that's what I thought initially. I thought, yeah, I have to give teachers advice. That's my role. I'm here to help change instruction and change practice. And I didn't really have any other strategies in my toolbox off the bat. But if you would see me or shadow me for a week in my role, you probably wouldn't see me giving a lot of advice or even giving feedback. There's an awesome podcast episode. It's one of Jim Knight's episodes, and he talks about feedback and how actually it may not be super effective to give a lot of feedback as a coach. But we need other strategies because that comes really naturally. So if you saw me as a coach, you might see me co-planning with teachers. So sitting down during planning, looking at lessons together, analyzing data with grade level teams, once in a while modeling a lesson or maybe co-teaching a lesson with a teacher where we're kind of going back and forth and asking a lot of questions. That's always my goal. As a coach, I love to talk. So that's always been something I'm working on, talking less and listening more, really getting teachers to do most of the talking. So hopefully that's what you would see is me stepping back a little bit, asking those questions so teachers start talking more.
I love that. And Jim Knight is such a legend. So if you're a literacy coach and you don't know his books, you have to pick them up. The Impact Cycle, right? Coaching Conversations. Those are great ones. We could link them in the show notes too.
For sure.
But it's so true. The day to day looks so different. One of the nice things about being a classroom teacher or even an interventionist is you have your schedule that's set. A Monday always looks the same. And yet, as a coach, your role is just so much more nuanced. You're doing lots of different things and
Mhm.
keeps you on your toes.
Right. Yeah. As a teacher, it's so concrete. And then the scheduling piece was actually really hard for me when I became a coach. That was one of my first questions is what should I be doing all day long? And I felt this guilt going back to my office. After I got all the kids in their classrooms, I'd go back to my office, shut the door, and it was just quiet. And that was the first time I was like, oh my goodness, I don't have a classroom to myself. And yeah, it's just an adjustment, getting used to a different schedule and creating your own schedule.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
remember in the beginning too, this idea of feeling guilty anytime I was in my office, like, oh no, I have to be in a classroom. Like, I have to push in all the time. But then also putting myself in overdrive where I was just like from one teacher to the next, skipping lunch, like not giving myself a lunch, not giving myself a prep because I just wanted to be seen and not someone like sitting behind a desk. But then I also realized, like, wait, in order to be an effective coach, I also needed time to plan. And sometimes that doesn't look like it's always face to face. So finding that balance is a delicate dance as well.
Yeah, I love how you said that, just wanting to be seen.
Yeah.
We do feel that as new coaches. We're so used to being seen and valued for something concrete in the classroom, and then we become a coach and we're looking for that again. How do we really show up and make sure teachers see us as valuable?
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody is just becoming a coach, or maybe they're in their first couple of years of coaching, what kind of advice would you give them if they're kind of tackling, like, how do I get into classrooms? How do I build rapport with teachers? How do I get them to trust me, to let me in and do this good work?
Oh, I love that question. So I remember hearing this advice as a new coach, which was spend your first year building relationships. And I don't think that's bad advice. I just feel like it's incomplete because a lot of new coaches, they're wondering, what does that look like? What things should I be setting up so that I can build those relationships? What should I be creating? What should I be doing every day? And so, what I always tell teachers is trust is built through the work, not before it. So, don't wait until you feel ready to reach out to teachers. Be bold, get into classrooms, and start doing the work even when you're not completely confident. So that might look like setting up an initial meeting with every single teacher on your roster, or maybe you get into classrooms to do a read aloud in every classroom initially. So you're finding these little ways to actually start doing the work, and that's really how you build those relationships. When I first started coaching, we brought on UFly Foundations. So that was our brand new phonics curriculum. And it was brand new to me, and it was also brand new to teachers. And teachers started asking me to come in and model lessons. And I had to be like, okay, I'm not a perfectionist right now. I have to just go with the flow. We're going to build our relationship through doing this work together. And those are some of my favorite coaching relationships. They started out with me as a vulnerable participant. I was learning this right alongside of them.
That needs to be a sticker, doing it through the work. I love that. And it's so true. I think one of the best times to be a brand new coach too is when there's some kind of new initiative or new curricular resources coming down the pipe, because, everyone feels vulnerable, and, you're not coming in as some expert either, but like, we're going to roll up our sleeves and like do this together because I'm here for you, and we're not going to just struggle with the new box on the shelf, but let's unpack it. Let's learn it together. It's a special time.
Exactly.
For sure. Does forming your skill-based groups feel a little mysterious? You have the screening data, but you're still asking, okay, how do I use this to move students forward? A good friend of the podcast, Dr. Stephanie Stoller, runs the Reading Science Academy, and she created an exclusive grouping resource bundle free for Literacy in Color listeners. You'll get Stephanie's cheat sheets for grouping students at the beginning, middle, and end of the year, plus a video that walks you through a real classroom example. I'll always proclaim that I myself am a proud Reading Science Academy member for life, and I can genuinely say that the quality of the resources and professional learning is top notch. The Facebook community is also one of the most supportive spaces I've experienced. Reading Science Academy is honestly one of the first places I go whenever I have a question about literacy instruction or assessment. So go to readingscienceacademy.com/color to get your free grouping resource bundle today. So you are one of my favorite coaches out on the social media realm, and I know that you've developed even a coaching hub to support coaches in their roles. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So honestly, I created the resource that I wish I'd had as a new coach. I remember I was constantly searching for a typical schedule. What does a coaching cycle look like? How do I organize my week? And so I started gathering things from all these different sources and creating things, and then I put them all together, which became my coaching hub. So the hub begins with like a 39-page PDF that has a bunch of clickable links, and then it takes coaches into my growing Google Drive where I'm constantly creating new resources and adding them to this hub. So I wanted new coaches to feel like they had someone walking alongside them, especially during that overwhelming first year as a coach, because there's a lot required of you when you first step into that role.
Yeah. So you're coaching the coach. I love it. I think it's fabulous. So we're definitely going to link it in the show notes. And if any coach is listening, it's definitely worth the grab because it's super useful. I'd love to transition now into how you've approached coaching writing in particular. And I know that you're a huge proponent of SRSD for writing instruction. And I don't think I've had any episodes on that just yet. So maybe you could enlighten everyone to just share even what the acronym stands for and what's involved with that framework.
Sure. Well, first of all, I love teaching writing, and I've really loved coaching around writing. It's one of the most cognitively demanding things we ask our kids to do. Kids are trying to generate ideas, organize them, spell words. There's so much that goes into it. And so SRSD is a writing approach that really addresses all of that. It stands for Self-Regulated Strategy Development. It's a mouthful, but it really gives students this consistent process for writing. And it combines writing strategies with self-regulation, which is so super powerful. Students learn how to write, but they're also learning to manage themselves when writing gets hard, which we don't talk about enough, how difficult writing is and how we really have to bring in those self-regulation pieces. So students start by reading a text, they're starting to learn about a topic, and then they go through each part of the writing process. And it's super explicit, which I also love. They're working together with the teacher, and then finally at the end, they're scoring, they're setting goals, and then doing that cycle all over again. But throughout the whole time, self-regulation is kind of at the center of it.
And that's such an important piece to the puzzle because I think even when it comes to a writing block, a lot of us are used to assigning writing and not necessarily teaching writing. And yet, when we're teaching writing, there's so much still that's involved in the process. And I think that's one of the challenges that coaches can often face too, is because teachers, I think in general, feel less confident teaching writing in comparison to reading
Mhm.
because it is this production task. So I know you mentioned already that it's just so much more cognitively demanding, but what else do you think is a factor to why writing is just so much harder than other things we have students do in literacy?
That's just such a relatable thing for me. So honestly, I understand the feeling. I was a teacher and I remember, I think I had 2 classes on teaching reading in college and no classes on teaching writing. So I went into the classroom from scratch. I just didn't have any experience with that. And then I became a coach at our school and found out our goal was writing. And I remember thinking, how am I supposed to support teachers when I didn't learn this myself? So I think, yeah, you're right. A lot of teachers are in this position. A lot of coaches are in this position too. And we care about writing. We were just never taught how to teach it well. There's a lot of research around effective writing. So that's what I've been trying to find in the last couple of years. I also love this quote: writing is harder than reading, and yet we've treated it like something kids will just pick up through exposure. So I really think teachers deserve training around approaches like SRSD.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we think about any other thing, like even with reading, we know explicit instruction is the key. No one's going to become a reader just because they're surrounded by books, and no one's going to become a writer just because you have written materials around you. So we need that same kind of explicit instruction, but more because we're tapping into now retrieval of letter sounds and spelling and handwriting and all of the things,
Yeah.
getting content down. So that all is looped into this whole idea of executive functioning and why executive functioning is such a critical part of our writing block or internally just writing in general. So
Mhm.
can you speak to why these executive functioning skills plays a huge role and how does SRSD set students up for success from the very beginning?
So writing places this huge demand on our students, like I said, right? They're having to handle all these different parts of writing. And I think sometimes we forget, if we hand students a piece of paper and say, go write, it's a lot for them. They're having to juggle all of these things at once. And I think since they're juggling so much, if it's too overwhelming, it's really easy for kids to not get the knowledge building benefits of writing. And we see many students crumple up their paper and lose motivation in those moments. So there's a lot of research around executive skills. We know that kids need those to do writing well. So instead of expecting our students to hold all these pieces in our working memory, we want to find something like SRSD that really gives them a consistent process and a structure to lean on.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some of the strategies that are used in SRSD to support executive functioning?
So self-regulation is the big one. So I always like to talk about self-talk and positive self-talk. So with one of the students that I'm tutoring, I always have us we brainstorm some positive self-talk statements together, and then he'll choose one of those statements to put at the top of his paper. So maybe it's, I can do hard things, or when I get tired, I can keep going, or I have a growth mindset. And then we're constantly referring to those statements throughout our time together. So that's a big one. And then we're also, as I'm teaching him all of these steps of the writing process, he's kind of monitoring himself. Which step am I on? Am I on the planning stage? Am I in the organizing stage? Am I in the writing stage? So he's learning to kind of stay organized. And that's a big part of self regulation as well.
Yeah, yeah. And you think about even if anyone does any type of writing themselves as adults, how hard it can be. Writer's block is so real. And Even getting started sometimes can be challenging, like writing an email. Now we're like, "Oh, Google AI just gave me some ideas, like, I'm just gonna use that." Like, sometimes we don't even have to think anymore, and when you do have to think, it really challenges you. Putting yourself in your student's shoes and how difficult even generating ideas or getting started and believing in yourself that you can get started and you can do hard things, like, it's a lot.
Yeah, and I'm reading Dr. Leslie Lott's book right now.
Oh,
It's
I got that
Executive
too.
Skills and Writing Instruction. You're reading this too?
Yeah,
Yeah. And in the book, they talk about how hard specifically organizing is and really taking your ideas and putting them into an outline and how many executive skills it takes to really get through a process like organizing. So, definitely learning more about how important executive skills are. And there's so much research out there stating that we should be teaching these skills and they help our students' writing. So, it's just time that we get that research into schools.
definitely. And one of the things I'm thinking about is, like, even when the term the science of reading came to be, I'm like, why did we call it that? Why did we not just say the science of literacy? Because writing feels like this back burner kind of thing. And finally, it's getting the attention that it deserves. And it's really, really necessary for everyone in this work.
So true.
So let's get practical, and maybe you can walk us through what a 5-day plan or like a week at a glance might look like if you're following an SRSD approach.
So, one of the things I love is that the routine with SRSD stays consistent each week. So, that's been so helpful, especially tutoring my student I've been talking about. We've been able to follow this process each week. So, typically, the week begins with students reading text. So, they're building knowledge around a topic. A close reading lesson is a great place to start. And then always reviewing the skills and how to go through the writing process. So SRSD uses something called POW or Power and Tide. And that's how students go through the writing process. So I love to review those acronyms with little chants and songs just to make it more fun and memorable. Our goal is for them to memorize those steps of the process so it's easier to get through. They have this structure to kind of fall back on. And then the teacher collaboratively goes through with students the planning process and the organizing process. And that's huge because I don't know about you, but I have set so many students off to write with a prompt and just expected them to start drafting their writing. So that planning and organizing step is so huge. Then the next few days, you want students to be drafting their writing. But I almost missed something. Before they ever draft their writing, we want them to orally rehearse what they're about to say, which is such a huge step. That oral language piece gets missed, and SRSD really highlights it. So maybe you have students sitting with a partner and they're orally reading all of their sentences before they ever pick up their pencil. Then they're drafting their writing, and then we end the week by scoring and goal setting. So they're going to score their writing, score an exemplar piece, and then set goals for the next cycle. So that cycle kind of repeats each week. And then, of course, self-regulation is a part of that the whole time. They're using those positive self-talk statements. They're going back and making sure they're at the right step. They're checking off as they go so they keep track.
I love a good routine and structure, and it makes it easier cognitively, even on the teacher delivering the instruction and for our students participating in the act. And I love this emphasis on the explicit teaching of planning and organizing because you're so right. We expect that kids are just going to get it and send them off and write up a storm. And instead, what we get are a huge variety of outputs from different levels of students in our classes. And I remember hearing Joan Sedita say once, I don't know, maybe it was in her book or in a webinar she delivered, but if we essentially spend more time on the planning and organizing aspect, we're going to have less time having to draft and revise because we front loaded all of that information that when it's time to write and put that pen to paper, the ideas are going to be flowing. And the same thing goes for that oral rehearsal. Like if we can't say it out loud, we can't write it. So kids need to have that practice and having an opportunity to get their ideas out. When we see writing that's disjointed or run-on sentences or fragments, and then we have a student read it out loud, it's like, oh, wait, that actually didn't make sense.
Mhm.
So putting in the prep work, I think, is such an important aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. The prep work makes it easy. Once you get to the draft, once you're ready to actually write the draft. If you've got all that prep time finished, you've put the work in, it's a whole lot easier.
Definitely.
Mhm.
So SRSD and Think SRSD, they really lean on those two acronyms, power, and then TIDE. I also want to say, like, there's no magic in the acronyms. Like, there's other acronyms that are great too,
Right.
but these are also just high leverage and really effective. And when you're consistent with an acronym, like, that's what leads students to success, not throwing them 20,000 acronyms and having a bank to choose from and not being sure where to lean into when it's time for the writing process. Do you want to just share what the acronyms stand for? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you have a little song if you want to share a little ditty with us.
Down to share a song or a chant. Yeah, so POWER stands for P is plan, O is organize. So that's when you're putting your ideas into a graphic organizer. W stands for write. And then the E and the R in power, which is for grades second and up, that stands for edit and revise. And then tide kind of fits within the O. So when it's time for you to organize, you're going to teach kids what tide stands for. So T is your topic sentence, I is your important information or facts, D is your details, and then E is your ending. And so I'll sing our little tide chant for everyone if you want to listen
Love
to it.
it.
And I should say this is from Lindsay Kemany's book, Rock Your Literacy Block. There's a beautiful video of her students singing this chant, which is way cuter than hearing me sing it. But sometimes it's nice just to hear what it actually sounds like.
Yeah.
So it goes like this. You start with your hands on your head and you're tapping your head. The topic tells what it's all about. Important information. Tell me more. Important information. Tell me more. Important information. Tell me more. Wrap it up with an ending. So you can see I did important information and details, or tell me more, 3 times. And that represents how we want our students to have a couple different examples for our older students. And also, you can use this framework for younger kids as well. SRSD recommends just cutting out the details for kindergartners at the very beginning, just to simplify it for them.
I love it. And I'm clapping over here because I love when you sing that. So sweet. And I think it's such a great way for kids to internalize what should be included in their writing as well, because sometimes an anchor chart doesn't always do it for us, but when they have like a little song or just something special to like recite in their heads, that assists with that self-regulation again. So I love how you mentioned making a modification for kindergarten as well. And that can even be great before kindergarten students have the ability to form their letters or be able to spell words. You, as the teacher, can still model Tide when
Yeah.
you're doing some kind of shared writing or sharing the pen or just modeling some writing based on a read aloud. We can still walk them through these kinds of processes before they have the skill set to do this work on their own too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I was a kindergarten teacher and I wish I had this framework back then because I did do some modeling, but just having a framework like this would have made it so much easier to follow the writing process. And I think our preschoolers and our kindergartners need to see the writing process modeled. We can start so much earlier than we do. A lot of preschool and kindergarten teachers will start with just handwriting or just drawing pictures. And I think those are important pieces, but we also can be modeling the writing process. That's so powerful to start early.
Definitely. And the nice thing is that process is going to stay the same as students move up the grades. It's just their sentence structures are going to get more complex. So when we start them early, it's really setting them up for success in the long run, too.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coaching a teacher who's looking to strengthen their writing instruction, where would you typically begin?
The first place I start is understanding what's already happening in that teacher's classroom. So I like to ask for the teacher's schedule. That's my favorite point to start at. So we'll talk through what's working, what are some challenges, what is the time allotment, like what does your actual writing block look like? And then once we have a goal, I try to get into classrooms pretty quickly as a coach. So whether that's me observing what the writing block looks like and taking notes that we've agreed on, Or sometimes teachers prefer that I model part of a writing lesson so they can just observe and we can talk about that. But I always like to get into classrooms pretty quickly. And the big thing I'll say here, I don't ever ask teachers to overhaul their writing block overnight because there's so many pieces and components of writing instruction. So I would say let's start with some high impact strategy, one thing at a time. Maybe we're going to start with a gist statement. So we'll learn how to take a look at a piece of text, do a close reading lesson with our students, and then create a gist statement, which is kind of like the summary statement of what you've just read. Or maybe we are looking at exemplars and learning how to score them together. So, yeah, if I was coaching a teacher at the very beginning, that's where I would start. And I actually have some experience with this. A couple special education teachers last year, I think it was September or October, they came to me and said, "Hey, we want to start changing our writing instruction. Help us know where to start." And I met with them, and that was kind of our first step. I got into their classrooms, and then we ended up doing the gist statement, which was so powerful with their students. So we found complex text, we did the whole close reading lesson, and then that was our starting point. It was the gist statement, and then we kind of went from there. So no need to overhaul everything all at once. I think it's small changes over time really add up.
Yeah. And that's what makes it really sustainable. So that's such great advice because it's so easy to hear about a framework or a way of doing things. And a good teacher who wants to do right by her kids or his kids is like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. I want to do that whole thing.
Mhm.
But how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Like we need to get there with baby steps. And so that's why I also love job embedded coaching because you might not know what the first step could be or to be reflective of your practice. Like, where do I even start? Like, how do I tackle this? So it's just nice to have that other person, other set of eyes, that sounding board to help you in that work too. Has there ever been a moment where you were coaching and supporting writing where it was not an SRSD framework? Perhaps you were coaching writing differently. And maybe looking back, like how has your coaching into writing evolved over the years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think before discovering SRSD, I was teaching and coaching writing the way that I was teaching it in the classroom or I was originally taught. So lots of balanced literacy in there because I think the first approach I used as a teacher was a version of Lucy Calkins' Units of Study. And it wasn't super explicit. I knew there was more to it, and I was really searching for that research. So when I found SRSD, it really changed how I coached around writing and the questions that I would ask teachers too. At the beginning, I used to ask, what mentor texts are you using or what activities are you doing this week? And my questions really changed. I started asking, what step of the writing process are your kids working through? Or how is the oral rehearsal going in your class? How are you getting students to talk? Or can I help you find some good exemplars that your kids can score? So started asking different questions that were really rooted in the research. But I definitely felt overwhelmed initially. Looking back when that writing goal for a school became writing, definitely overwhelmed at the beginning, but SRSD gave me that coaching framework to coach around.
So helpful. And I'm sure coaches who have been in the game perhaps a long time can resonate with having experience doing things differently, maybe even still. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm in my little bubble and I think everybody's following the science, and there's still a lot of schools doing balanced literacy practices. But same, I mean, I'm in New Jersey
Yeah.
and Lucy Calkins Teachers College is right in our backyard. And so it was that heavily concentrated idea of to just have kids write up a storm, like volume, volume, volume. The more they write, you might have a lot of not so good writing, but maybe it'll be that one glimmering piece. Finally, if you just make them write enough. And yet we really lacked that explicit teaching. Maybe there were some strategies for the kids who already could do it, but for the kids who couldn't, like, how do we get them there? So it's nice to have something to lean on that gets them there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there any success stories that you want to share from a coaching point of view of a teacher who was perhaps even hesitant to work on writing and experienced some meaningful shifts when working through SRSD or just more explicit writing instruction?
Yeah. So I'd love to tell you first about a student that I'm working with. I've mentioned him already, but I've been tutoring him this summer. He's a third grader going into fourth grade. And at the beginning of the summer, he told me writing was that subject he felt least confident in, which hurt my heart because I know he's so capable. I've been working with him since the end of his second grade year, and we've been working through the U-Fly scope and sequence. And just recently, he passed the test, the U-Fly placement test. So he made it through the scope and sequence, super excited about reading, but writing, he didn't feel the same about. So I knew that was something I wanted to be our goal for the summer. So we started using SRSD. He learned all the steps of the writing process. And I noticed he stopped asking, what do I write next? Or what step are we on? So he was starting to kind of take some responsibility for going through those steps together. And he got really excited when it was time for us to do writing in our sessions. We're still in the midst of him growing as a writer. But it's also, SRSD has allowed us to build knowledge around a topic. So he is really passionate about soccer and the World Cup, which is super relevant right now. So we've been able to learn about different soccer players. We've done some writing pieces around the World Cup lately. So it's been really tied to his interests as well. So that's another great thing about SRSD is you can choose topics where kids are building knowledge on those different topics and then go through the writing process to learn more about them.
That's so powerful. I love that success story. And it's so heartening to hear about a kid's transformation in feeling not so confident to now, like, I could do this work. And I also love this aspect of knowledge building because if you think back to other frameworks of teaching writing, sometimes we are just throwing kids these prompts and they all come with different background knowledge, life experiences to bring to the table to address the prompt. And even something as simple like, how did you spend your summer vacation? Some kids may have gone on a plane to Europe, and some kids maybe just stayed home watching television with a sibling. And so leveraging writing based on reading, it's just such a powerful way. Like we're giving kids language, we're giving them things to write about. So it really levels the playing field and gives every kid access to be able to do the work when you're starting with the text.
Yeah, I love that. It does really connect reading and writing. And I think we build so much reading knowledge through writing as well.
Yeah.
So writing really does lead to better reading results. So we're not just expressing when we write, we're also gaining new knowledge through the process.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
makes you become more of an expert.
Yeah.
Anytime you have to put into writing, it's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, wait, now I have to synthesize, I have to summarize, I have to do all the things." So, if you were to walk into an elementary classroom, what are a few things that you'd hope to see in terms of writing instruction that would make your little light bulb go off and say like, "Oh, yeah, this teacher's got it right. This teacher's doing it right when it comes to writing."
Well, one is oral language, and I mentioned this earlier. There's a quote from the book I mentioned, Dr. Leslie Lodd's book, and it has been said that writing floats on a sea of talk, which is first of all so poetic.
And
But
beautiful, yeah.
that's so true, right? Our writing really is lifted up by our oral language practice. So, something if I was observing in a classroom, I would love to see is lots of discussion, lots of the teacher modeling, but also having students add their input, students working together and orally rehearsing their tied outlines together. Maybe as a class, you're looking at an exemplar piece and saying, what do we like about this? Turn and talk to a partner. What's something that we like about this? Let's score it. What parts of Tide are included in this exemplar? So, oral language is huge. Students don't need to be sitting quietly at their desks all the time. That might be part of the writing process, but I think we should expect some oral language in the classroom and discussion. And then, like we talked about earlier, some sort of acronym to help kids through the writing process. It doesn't need to be POW, it doesn't need to be Tide, but something that gives kids that structure to lean on so they're memorizing the parts of the writing process and able to kind of check off and self regulate as they go. And I think having that visually displayed is really helpful too. So students can always see where they're at. And then I think last but not least, just students and teachers together. The teacher at the easel or under the document camera with students gathered around. And sometimes we're going to be handing our students a prompt and asking them to write, but a lot of the time it can be collaborative. And Lindsay Kemeny in her book She says it can take up to 10 weeks before we fully release our responsibility to our kids. So it's very gradual. We're doing lots of collaborative writing before we ever expect them to write on their own.
Those are such great noticings. I love that 10-week sentiment from Lindsay as well, because sometimes as a teacher, when you're reflective, oh, is this working? I don't know. But if you just give it that time and you give them the experience in all of your scaffolding, it'll all settle in. One thing when you were talking about just that student-teacher relationship and teacher at the easel, I had a podcast episode with Lynn Stone, and one of the things that she was mentioning is students need to see the teacher writing. Like, students need to see the teacher putting their marker to their chart. And I think, too, like we've gotten into this tech era of teaching where a lot of the work is on slides. So just the act of having that model in front of us, like, what does it look like to put pen to paper? What does it look like to form the letters, to think aloud your thoughts? How am I going to start this sentence? Like, it is so powerful to have that model. And so I'm so glad that you said that one in particular, too. But they're all such great tidbits to look out for when it comes to writing instruction. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So if somebody is really interested in learning more about SRSD and they want to set their students up for writing success, where should they start?
So I would start here. I would encourage teachers not to feel like they need to overhaul everything tomorrow, because it's a lot. And many of us are currently teaching or coaching around writing very differently. So start with one writing strategy. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe it's the gist statement, or maybe it's orally rehearsing your writing, or maybe you're just going to start modeling more often in your classroom. So start with one thing and don't wait until you feel like the perfect writing teacher to get started. I think sometimes we think we have to have all the research, all the knowledge, and then we'll start teaching differently. So my advice is just to get started. And I think staying consistent is really important as well.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And follow Leah because she gives great advice on writing too.
I love to talk about writing.
So this has been such a wonderful conversation. I love that we got a little dual action going on with some coaching and some writing and some coaching writing. So it's been such a valuable conversation, I think, for the coach and for the teacher. I'm so grateful for your expertise in the field, for your expertise in coaching, and just for sharing all of your knowledge around writing. So where can listeners connect with you further?
Sure. So you can find me as the early literacy coach on social media. So Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I love talking to teachers. I love talking to coaches about both topics we addressed today, about coaching practices, but also writing is currently something I'm reading a lot about and learning a lot about. So I'd love to learn alongside anyone else who's wanting to get some more information. And then you mentioned my coaching hub earlier as well. So if you are a new coach or an experienced coach, that is a great starting point for your year to just gain resources and hear some stories and strategies from my own experience. So we would love for you to join us in the hub.
Perfect. So we'll link all of those things in the show notes, and be sure to connect with Leah. She is a gem and as lovely on social media and in person as she is on this show. So thanks again, Leah.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
Thank you so much for tuning into Literacy in Color. I hope today's episode left you feeling both inspired and equipped with something new to add to your teaching toolkit. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would truly mean so much to me if you'd leave a 5-star review. It helps other educators find the show and join our colorful community. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For more tips, tools, and resources, be sure to check out the links in the show notes at michelleandthecolorfulclassroom.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, be colorful and teach colorfully. Do you ever catch yourself saying, English is just crazy? Maybe your students come across a tricky word and you tell them, you just have to memorize that one, or this is the part you have to know by heart. But deep down, you know it's still confusing. Here's the truth. English isn't random. It's a wonderfully complex system, and once you understand how that system works, through sound, structure, and meaning, everything changes. That's what Sarah, Paul, and I teach inside Mastering Morphology. This isn't another curriculum. It's deep teacher knowledge inside a practical, comprehensive course that finally shows you how words really work. No more exceptions, no more gimmicks or patching holes with memorization or phonics alone. It's time to go beyond sound it out and give your students the framework they need to truly understand words. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start teaching with confidence, join us inside Mastering Morphology. Enrollment is open now, so we invite you to click the link in the show notes to get started.